Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing this evening?
He's sick, everyone. Don't
Yeah.
let him fool you. He's sick.
Yeah, I thought at first it was just allergies, but yeah, it's back into I think a little low-grade sinus infection. But I'm here. I'm here.
And so am I. And this will be the Sarah monologue hour as I shall carry the show.
You always do.
No, I don't. I feel like you've had some soapbox moments recently. I haven't had a soapbox moment in a while. I've just
Yeah.
had, where I stand on this issue. Let me repeat myself and let's move on.
Yeah, I guess I have had a few rants the last few shows if folks have noticed, but I don't know if I have any rants in me this week. We shall see what happens.
And it's shocking considering some of your most famous rant moments have come from talking about season 5 of The Flash. And yet tonight we can finally talk about the episode that just aired the other night.
Yeah, we can. We can. And I'm sure I will find something to cool about. Just don't lose faith in me yet.
It's okay. I mean, what's there to talk about? You just have King Shark versus Gorilla Grodd. Cisco's probably going to leave the show. You have Joe back. You have, we can't actually rant about Cicada tonight because he was not in the show.
And that's
although
why
I was
I enjoyed it.
afraid of him.
Well,
That's why you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, Cicada was there in the sense that obviously Iris was still very shaken from her experience from Cause and Excess.
Mhm.
And so the threat, it goes back to something we've said in the past about with another show that I was just watching recently, Star Trek Discovery, and they had there was an alien on Saru, one of the Kelpians planet, and sometimes the threat, the unknown, not showing the villain or the threat, is actually more scary than actually having them on. So, Iris's PTSD actually was unusual for this show. Given that her character usually is not the one that's dealing with those types of issues. But it was a good moment, especially having with Joe being back. We've said that you could just plug in Cecile for Joe, but in that moment when I was watching those scenes between, in particularly the good interaction between Candace and Jesse L. Martin, I really have missed Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize, I guess it's one of those things you don't realize how important some supporting characters are until they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe not being there for, gosh, I guess it was a good 5 or 6 episodes.
I don't know. There was 2 hiatuses in between, and that, as much as I appreciated what they did with Iris, because I think that kind of brings everything back down to reality. It kind of grounds everything when you realize that, no, these are people. And of course, if they go to a place that they view as safe and somebody is in there who is going to threaten you and potentially even kill you, all of a sudden the places where you thought was home and you were safe, and suddenly that security is gone. And it's very similar, and it's something that the Flash writers seem to be able to portray better than what they're doing on Arrow, because they're trying to do that with Felicity this season. Yet they're making her just a neurotic person about safety rather than what they did with Iris, which was a lot more subtler and just allowed her to regain her power by working it out with her father.
Yeah.
So Though my only complaint though is there was a hiatus in between. I completely forgot about what happened in the previous episode.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was kind of like I was like, why is she still on that? Wasn't that like weeks ago?
It was weeks ago.
I was just like, why is that so? It's not, it didn't just happen last week, but in her world it did. And
Right.
I don't even understand. Like the timeline has changed 52 times. Why aren't we focused on that? Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. They'll get there. They'll get there. Maybe as early as next week.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, you know, I, it was funny when I recall when we were talking about cause and excess, it was a returned form. And as much as this episode, it didn't further the time space continuum stuff that I really like when they delve into, but this is still classic Flash. I
Yeah.
mean, Gorilla Grodd and King Shark. I didn't have as much Gorilla Grodd as I would have appreciated, but I still like it. You also have that moment that we haven't seen in a while, but every now and then Barry does do something to piss off Caitlin and Cisco,
Yep.
and yet that great team dynamic suddenly realize like Barry can be a really good villain.
Yeah.
Season 3. But sometimes he just gets too focused on what he deems is right
Yeah.
and not realize the consequences of that decision.
You're so correct on that. He is very, he does have a very strict moral code about him, and he gets very rigid, and that rigidity definitely can work to his detriment. And as you said, it's good to have that original Team Flash dynamic where they can just kick Barry and say, "Look, dude, really, seriously." But but the other hand, with the choice that Barry makes to because it really gets into the deeper issues of consent and medical. When I think about medical treatments and those kind of things, I mean, they really mind that kind of superficially, because they really could have gotten a lot deeper in that. But I know that this show is not one to do that. But I do think the interplay argument that Barry and Cisco are having in particular about whether or not to save him, it was one of those things where it was pointed out that philosophical choice that heroes make each and every day when they suit up, and
Mm-hmm.
and I like that they went there a little bit, to remind us, because again, as you were saying, it grounds the show when they do that, and yet and it was a good, solid, like classic Flash episode, because that's one of the things that really stood out in some of those earlier seasons when they had shows like this, where they really did. Of course, they had the great action, and obviously we'll talk about the King Shark Grodd battle at the end, but it was what's been missing when people say Barry's been diminished or whatever, is these types of dynamics where the team has. And he gets that when he faces off with Caitlin and Cisco on these types of questions, because they're talking at it as far as more as a team, versus when Barry and Iris have these discussions, it's like two spouses talking together. And so, there's just a different dynamic there, and I think that core dynamic of those three characters really is the heart of the show. And I'm glad that was focused, that was highlighted again this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go back to what you were saying about just the storytelling elements, I really at first I was kind of like, all right, wrap it up. I clearly know what's happening here. So Gorilla Grodd is controlling King Shark and he's cured. Oh, he's not cured. And then he takes the cure. But I like that moment of realization about how he really did make the ultimate sacrifice. And when he chose to become King Shark at the end of the day, because that was what was right in the moment. There was no other option. And those are really the heroic moments, and that sacrifice that, and I, maybe it's too early to even get into this, but I think maybe that's what a lot of people are talking about when they say that Barry's been diminished. He hasn't been making as many sacrifices.
He hasn't, yeah.
I mean, and again, something that continues to bother me is you keep talking to your daughter about how you can't mess with the timeline, or else it'll crack and it'll splinter and reality will shift forever. She's been in present day or current day, her past, for how long? How long is this? Like there's just something about it where it seems very convenient, and yet and we know as viewers that she's traveling back and forth between the future and the past. So what are the consequences for this action? I understand why he made that decision in the pilot, in the first episode this season, when he said he realized that she grew up without him, and this may be his only chance. That's selfish, Barry.
Very, very.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's very selfish, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because, he learned through Flashpoint when he made that very selfish choice. Basically seasons 3 and 4 were the ramifications of that selfish choice of Flashpoint, and how that, obviously caused Cisco lost Dante, Caitlin Killer Frost. I mean, set off Savitar. I mean, any number of things that, because of his selfishness, has, led to other people having major sacrifices. And so, I think the lecture, when he gave Jay's lecture to Nora at the end of Cause in Excess, it was good, but it was almost like he should have had that with her like a whole heck of a lot earlier.
Right, exactly.
Such that she wouldn't have done those, mess with the timeline 52 times. I mean, good gosh, they're lucky that, obviously we're going to see as we move forward, the ramifications of that. And one of those, obviously some of the things have been positive, like potentially positive, like moving Iris starting the newspaper sooner, and some of the other things. But there's going, we're going to see some time race coming soon, and and also Fawn, whatever scheme he has that he's going to use to torment Barry this time. We're going to see the consequences of her messing around with the timeline. Where hopefully. She may even, hopefully, or she may even Marty McFly herself and not be, and this time not be able to, correct things and save herself in this particular time continuity.
Which would is constantly what happens on these shows, in the sense that there's such a history with these characters and their legacies and their stories, that they want to try to give everybody a moment. And that causes like, okay, so now we're done with this character, let's rewrite the timeline. Yep. Suddenly we can come up with this whole new dynamic. It's interesting, but I mean, speaking about timelines, so I can't help talk about The Flash this week and not talk about Arrow. I don't want to get into the episode that recently aired or anything, but I do want to address the announcement that happened yesterday. Arrow will be wrapping after its 8th season, which will be only 10 episodes long. Go figure. 10th episode this year was the part 2 of the crossover. 10th episode next year. Like, that would be kind of like doing a show wrong if you air a crossover episode as your final, like your series finale. So we'll see how they figure that all out.
So, well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point, because all the analysis and all the people tweeting and posting on Facebook and everything, you're the first person I think that has raised that point.
Oh, I just thought of it.
But it makes sense to, I mean, if you're going to honor the show that basically was the game changer for the superhero genre on television, I don't think we're overstating that. You do need to give it a proper send off, and to get it back in universe, that means Oliver has to survive the crisis.
Oh, maybe.
Well, unless you have, unless you're going to have the finale be like a clip show or something like that, where they.
Most finales are.
Yeah.
We don't know at the end of the day what they're going to do, because, again, there's so much. Because this show kicked off this universe that includes time travel, that includes Lazarus pits, that includes all of this stuff where at the end of the day, if Oliver Queen dies in Crisis, will he reappear like in the Flash series finale or, on Legends? We have no idea. And that's part beauty and part a little irritating, because there's also several fans who only watch Arrow,
right? And
they do that for various reasons, or people who only watch Flash, and so it's kind of, I mean, again, this is the beauty and the kind of annoyance of it all. We know most likely he will die in Crisis. Why are we wasting 18 more episodes on viewing a future of where Star City continues to be crappy? And this is the legacy he left behind, and this is the sacrifice he made? Like that's what's getting under my skin, and that's where I really need Nora to come in and change the timeline 52 times, because I don't like that. I don't like that idea that yes, he goes that full journey from vigilante murderer to hero vigilante to just an unmasked hero to make the ultimate hero sacrifice in Crisis. Yet at the same time, this series was all about him saving his city, and he didn't do that. So now what, his daughter and son are supposed to? Like there's something, it's really getting under my skin how this is being created.
Yeah, and see, I think this exercise of what we're seeing as far as this season 7 flash forwards is a potential future. But as we know with these shows, things get reset all the time. And so I think the proper legacy, the proper send-off is to have his legacy be where he did not fail the city. Because otherwise, you just wasted 8 years of this great arc with this character.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to end that way.
No, I agree.
And quite frankly, it could be one of those things where, they have Oliver, have this send off pre-Crisis, that their finale hits, before, they have a proper finale before the crossover, and then just elements of Arrow, various members of the team show up in the crossover where he might make the sacrifice there. But, I don't know. I mean, it's any number of ways they can go about it. But I hope they do right by the series and not like what they did with their 100th, where it was a part of a crossover event. They give them a proper send-off as a standalone show.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I was thinking about that while I brought up this series. Because as much as we want to sit here and be like, the right thing to do would be for this to end properly, yet they already screwed them over during the 100th episode. So we'll see if they learn from that mistake, because a lot of people called them out for that.
Yeah.
So we got a year, and I think overall these are just good lessons. Like, Arrowverse proved that building a universe on TV can work.
Yep.
And it is very profitable, and it's what viewers crave, especially given the MCU and everything. But at the same time, there are ways to coordinate this without reducing stakes so much. Like, don't do flash forwards, maybe 1 episode or 2 episode to get it like an oh my god moment. But currently it's kind of just an annoyance for me. And then also just be very careful about how making sure like these shows, not only do they work fantastic together as a collective, but they can run very smoothly independently too. Speaking about a collective and group of heroes, let's talk about Doom Patrol.
Let's.
So, okay, I don't even know where to start in this conversation, but I'm going to start here in the sense that I had an out loud laugh moment in watching the most recent episode. And it's the most subtle thing, and I don't know why it hit me as so amusing. But when they're in the hotel and they do the pan shot of the girls on one bed, and then they move over, and Cyborg, Robot Man, Negative Man are all in the same bed. It was so like endearing.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. Like, it was subtle, and you could see Negative Man, his face is completely covered, and yet there's so much emotion. Same thing with Robot Man, and I love this show.
Yeah. It's quickly becoming my new favorite too. It's just so, like you said, so many little things, subtle things like that make this show work. And this week's episode in particular really spoke to me, as far as they're really exploring more of Negative Man's backstory, and how and how when he went into the the creation machine for Mr. Nobody, he and splitting out and really being that the negative energy life force, being a real like reflection, a mirror of Larry.
Yep.
And how and Larry's secret, and Larry's like doing everything to be this hero and live a life where in the 1950s, 60s America, and even present day, I mean, dealing with it now, where not being free to explore sexuality, and then when he had the accident, and how his just the pain, his wife realizes that this was all she realized then that in his pain and everything after the incident, that he did indeed love someone else, and she let him go so he could explore that. But then after Larry and his partner he was having an affair with, had the opportunity to be free, Larry pushes him away. And it is just like how he keeps trying to push away the negative energy, And so it's just, it's just great storytelling in that regard. And then you look at Cyborg, and I love how, his dad is just like, yeah, you want to be a superhero, huh? And it's like, nope, you can't have the Justice League jet.
I like before we jump to Cyborg, I want to go back to Negative Man
Yeah.
because my favorite moment was actually his brief conversation with Crazy Jane.
Mm,
Because I didn't think about that parallel about how she has all of these different personalities, and yet as much there's pain in there, but she's not resistant. She knows who she is in a way,
yeah.
and 1 minute at a time. But there's almost a degree of an acceptance that Negative Man just now without the chief is trying to gain as he tries to go with his family essentially now,
Mm,
and realize that he has to figure this out
yeah.
because this has been a part of him for decades now, and it's just literally eating him alive, and he's got to figure out how to accept who he is on the inside as much as he is on the outside. And I just liked that moment because I didn't like that dynamic, and I think that's what I really enjoy about this show is they do the pairings cleverly.
Yeah.
Like to go back to Cyborg, and I never know her name, but
The actress. Yeah.
the actress like they too are constantly they're deemed as like perfection,
Hmm.
and they're struggling with their own fear, and I liked how they brought that up. And I don't know, they're very clever with how they are utilizing all these characters common goal to get Chief. Like that's what shows like Titans and Legends of Tomorrow and a few other shows that seem to try to gather all of these. Deadly Class, which we're going to talk about later, continues to have that same problem. Set in your pilot episode, set that goal. What makes
Yeah.
all of these people really united? And then as they're going about to achieve it, you can start to really delve into bits and pieces of their past, their individual stories, while unifying to create a collective arc.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 That's a very good point about that. And I just remember Elastigirl is who he was
Yep.
paired with.
Hmm.
And and that's each you were talking about family and
Hmm.
trying to find a sense of belonging, and the way they're constructing this group of individuals to get that collective goal is not like it's not a contrived kind of thing.
Right.
It's like you said, it's a very solid way of storytelling of of these collection of misfits coming together,
Hmm.
and 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 all the little small moments, like for example, Cyborg and the Justice League Jet, and he, it's good. I'm actually glad. I see why they brought Cyborg into the show now,
Hmm.
because he is used to being a part of the Justice League, and you know they have the teamwork and the camaraderie, and they have all these great resources at their disposal and everything, and then now you got the Doom Patrol here, who is like in this locked away with the chief, because the chief is just trying to help them with their individual idiosyncrasies and problems, and they're not perfect like Justice League
Yep.
members are perceived to be. And so yeah, I mean, it's really a very good show, because as we've just discussed, the Arrowverse, as far as a shared universe, and what we typically think of like superhero shows to be. This one flips it on its head, and it really works. And so far,
Right.
but I feel confident now. We're 3 episodes in. By this point in Titans and other shows, you can start seeing some of the flaws. And so far, this show's been very solid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just stay the course. There's something about the writing where I'm confident that they know exactly where they want to go.
Hmm.
And by episode 3, that's what you should have confidence that this is actually going somewhere.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose for it. And yeah, I agree with you. Cyborg at first he was used in a way to replace Jane because she got sucked up
Hmm.
by the albino donkey. Never
Yeah.
thought I'd say that. And now they've also been able to, through that whole expedition, be able to say no, he's going to try to prove something different.
Hmm.
He's after this to prove to his own father. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I love it. It's endearing. Out of all the shows of Misfits, so far I'm much more in favor of Doom Patrol than its counterparts, I guess I would say.
Hmm.
But now Deadly Class is not technically the same kind of show. I mean, Doom Patrol is more similar to Legends of Tomorrow and Umbrella Academy than it
Yeah.
is Deadly Class.
Yep.
Because Deadly Class isn't necessarily about superheroes. It's based off of a comic, but it's not necessarily superpower people.
Right. Right.
We're talking assassins.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I stand with this show anymore. And the latest episode where they're all locked in their rooms for basically the whole episode, and Saya and Maria basically come to a head, I thought was stronger than a lot of the recent episodes
Hmm.
because it reminded me that this is why Marcus is so different than everybody else, is because he's a rat and he doesn't have that family, that clan, that history, that legacy. And I almost forgot until this episode how much Saya and Maria do. And I didn't even realize that they would be at war with one another. But it's that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been building over the course of the last, I guess, 2, 3 episodes. Because I remember when we first started watching this series, and I think it was the first or second episode where Saya and Marcus had that moment on the rooftop, and I think we were laughing about ships
Mm-hmm.
maybe starting to sell,
Mm-hmm.
and so they laid the groundwork way back at the beginning. But of course, as things progressed, it's actually Maria and Marcus who ended up uh, hooking up and having the relationship. So it's been one of those things that's been building, and because of the death of Chico, and also what was his name?
I just watched the episode and I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah. But part of the clan, one of the other factions in the school, um, it really, all the secrets and things that Marcus has built on a lie, and all those things kind of are coming to a head.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we had the fight there in the cafeteria there with Maria and Saya. Um, didn't get finished, but this has been building, and so it opens the door. It opened the door for Marcus to basically really share, basically tell the whole class, at least his cohort that he spends most time with. Look, y'all, here's the deal, and of course, Master Lin forces the issue too, with him taking him to interrogation whenever Marcus sneaks out, and showing him all those videos of family. But I think this episode succeeded because of that. Because it had, I mean, the show has gone a bit adrift the last couple episodes. I mean, the Vegas trip was like, you know, it was funny. It had its moments, but even though this was also a bottle show, it seemed to be a bottle show to get things reoriented back to what the core of this this series is about.
Right, exactly. I felt the same way. It's a very similar bottle episode that they did in the detention episode where they were all locked in detention, and of course, the Yakuza is out to get Saya, and that's where you have the classic rooftop moment. That's a very good episode. It's similar to this one. And as much as I didn't like the Las Vegas trip as a whole, that final sequence with Chico's death is a good domino that they've just been allowing to fall and create this tension and this realization that, like, that moment between Lynn and Maria.
Yeah.
Or no, not Lynn and Maria. It was between Maria and Lynn's sister.
Yeah, Gal. Yeah, Master
Gal.
Yeah.
Master Gal. Was so good because she spoke nothing but the truth. Mm-hmm. Like, Maria is really the cancer. It's not Marcus. I mean, you could say Marcus coming to the school really brought all of this on in a way, but it's Maria has been using Marcus since day one.
Yeah.
And if you go back to watch those first few episodes, they really did a good job with making sure you knew exactly why Chico's death had to happen and why it had to be from Maria. And now she's suffering from the consequences. And so you realize, like, why did it take her so long to do that? Well, I mean, she knew this would happen. This is a shit show.
Yeah, yeah.
But I didn't realize the previous episode when she killed someone from the Yakuza in the class that that would suddenly twist everything. I mean, it's one thing that Maria knew Saya had feelings for Marcus, and then now Maria's dating Marcus. Mm-hmm. But now on top of that, there's a turf war, and both of them are leaders, and I like how at the end Saya really makes a choice. I don't know if it's the right one because Maria's got to pay for her consequences eventually, right? I mean, that's right. At the end of the day what's not happening.
Yeah, yeah. She's going to have to pay for the consequences of it. And yeah, I mean, and I guess with Fuckface, with that's his name, and with Marcus,
so casually.
Yeah, well, that's his name. Yeah, but him basically threatened to blow the whole thing up about Chico's death. I think it's important now that Marcus told Master Lin that what was really going on, because that's going to be the card that is going to save Marcus and the rest of the kids from the incident that happened in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was watching, I was like, oh boy, this really sucks. He's like spilling the beans on everything. Where's this going to go? But now when you think back to the previous episode or so where Fuckface calls Marcus and says, hey, I know about your little adventure in Las Vegas, and I know all about you, and you claiming all the credit for what happened at the boys' home, at the youth home, and I'm going, so it forces Marcus's hand, but we're at the penultimate episode now, so next week, so it will, all these little threads, as far as as you're saying with Maria and Saya, and they're starting out to be very good friends, and now they've become rivals. And there's Victor and Brandy, and working for Master Gao, and Master Lin trying to hold the school together, and at the same at the same time trying to save his daughter from the clans. As well. I mean, there's what I like about this show has multiple textures and multiple layers, and so many subplots that You almost sometimes need a chart to like keep track of like what's going on with each particular faction, because because each one is interrelated to the others. And as you were saying, with Chico's death being a domino that caused other things to fall, all these other little side events are also part of that chain of dominoes that makes up for the whole of the series.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, as textures. And I, as much as like the last few episodes haven't really hit me as much as like the first 4, I still am confident that the writers know where they're going. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a choice that Lynn has to make that goes back to Marcus's point. Why have a school where assassins are being trained, and yet they are bloodlines of the most rich and powerful people in the world? Like, where's the justice in that? What is the moral code? And the loyalty, and that difference between just training soldiers for social class war and training people to make sure that the bad guys, quote unquote, really do suffer and really do pay the price. And I think that's where they're going, and potentially that choice will end the season and catapult us into season 2, where it's still going to be, but much more of a surface war between Lynn and Master Gao.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you like any of these theories and want to tell us your own theories about any of these shows, why don't you tell our listeners where they can tweet you their thoughts?
Yes, you can tweet me your thoughts, and my voice will be much better next week at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me on Twitter at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Good night, geek out. You're welcome.